New Year. Welcome back to another episode of the Inside Lines podcast. I'm your host, Atoya Burleson.
And I am Tia Averill.
Coming up a bit later in the show, we are kicking off the new year with Emmy award-winning journalist Jemele Hill. We'll also be getting into our hot take this week, where we'll be discussing Taraji Henson's month-long hiatus to Bali. But first, Tia, how was your New Year?
Yeah, my New Year was good.
I guess I should say your New Year's Eve celebration.
Look, I don't know if y'all saw, but my tail was on the couch, okay? You can kind of hear it in my voice. I'm getting over. I don't know what kind of sickness it was. It was not the flu, because in between my naps, like one day I took like 3 naps, like 3-hour-long naps. I was up, cleaning and moving and organizing the whole thing. So I don't know what I had, but just like headache, fatigue, congestion, the whole 9. So New Year's Eve, I canceled everything and my tail was on the couch, rung in the New Year with my kids, okay? And called it a day. But how was your New Year's Eve? Did you go anywhere?
New Year's was very, it was busy, but it wasn't crazy busy. So one of my daughter's close friends, her birthday's on New Year's Eve. So we did a celebration with them during the day. And then from there, we went to another friend. She had her 20-year vow renewal on New Year's. So we went to that as well.
Oh, nice.
And celebrated them. And then we swung by a friend's house to say Happy New Year. And then we came home and spent time with the kids, brought in the New Year. Their friends were over. We played games, girl. I had the, what do you call it? The sparkling cider. We had a sparkling cider.
Oh, nice.
And, we played apples to apples. We had a good old time. I mean, my son, when he would win, he was playing, what's that song? Every time he win a card, he'd be playing that song. I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man. So every time he win, we had to hear that song. And then we had little Nate. When he won, he was grittying around the table, all around the living room. It was a lot because, when we compete and play games, it's serious. But typical Burleson style of hanging out, a little crazy, but a lot of fun. So New Year's was good to us. I could not complain. Got to see a lot of people and enjoy the family.
Y'all were busy. Okay, y'all were busy. Okay, you just said we were low key, and then you named like 4 or 5 events. Okay,
it was a few events, but it didn't feel like it was overwhelming because we just got to spend a little time with different people. So, and it wasn't necessarily partying where I had to be, on my dressing all up. And I mean, I guess for the wedding, the vow renewal, I had to dress up a little, but I wasn't there the whole time. Nate had to get back because we didn't want to stay out too late because we wanted to spend time with our kids. My oldest is a senior and he had to get up and work the next morning. Let's be clear. So a lot, but not too much, I guess, for us.
Oh, did he?
Yes, he had to work.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
There is that. All right, enough about New Year's. Y'all let us know how y'all's New Year's was. But first, let's get into this week's hot take. All right, it's time for this week's hot take. Tia, what we got?
Okay, so this week in Hot Takes, we are talking to Taraji Henson and her month-long hiatus. Mm-hmm. So if you guys did not hear about this, Taraji was on Angie Martinez podcast titled In Real Life, where they're discussing a plethora of things, but one of them is Taraji's talking about like her not being happy and like how she has been unhappy a long time, how she is usually the person that brings up the room when she steps into the room, but she's so depleted. She does not know where to find her happiness at. So she's taking her first ever solo trip out of the country to Bali for a whole month. And so it got me to thinking just in general, there's so many people that are in like a similar space where they're unhappy and not really, they don't even know how to like climb out of it. Right.
Right.
And, also, like the notion of like, okay, well, I need to take time away from myself, right? And the guilt associated with being that, especially if you are a mother or anything like that. So I wanted to ask, Atoya, I want to check in with you. How are you feeling? And do you think you would consider something like this, like a solo trip like this too?
Well, I'm feeling good. Like, I feel like between Christmas and New Year, I had a nice week to just kind of chill a little bit. I had some days to myself. So thank you for asking that. But I understand what she's saying, where you do get overwhelmed and you do go through phases where it is a lot and you are you just need a break. You need a break from everything, right? And to your point, Tia, that is hard to do, especially when you have younger kids. And luckily for Taraji, like her child is older, so she can take that month-long trip to Bali and just get away and relax. And I'm happy that she's doing that. I just hope she takes somebody with her. Just like I couldn't go by myself for a month and like by myself. Like I need somebody like a security, assistant, something. You know what I'm saying? Like I ain't going to another country just alone. But I would love to just get away by myself, knowing that I'm safe, and really just decompress and like just really find a different part of yourself. You know what I mean? Because I do think as women, we naturally give to others. We deplete ourselves. We try to fill ourselves up when we can, but do we do it enough? Like, is there enough time to really like find that self-discovery and find that other side of you that you're like, oh my gosh, I needed this. So I'm proud of her. And I know that that's hard, but girl, please take somebody with you, girl, because another country. Would you go by yourself to another country, Tia?
So yes. And you know what?
Wait, what?
I would. But I have always said that I would take a solo trip. I just had not worked up enough courage to do so. But okay, so
wait. Courage meaning by yourself, as in like not
the courage to do
anyone?
That.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So y'all know, friend of the show, friend of the podcast, Ashley Witherspoon has a new podcast, Dear Young Queens. And her co-host, Alexis Stoudemire, on the very first episode, talked about how she does these international solo trips, and she's been doing them, and she has 4 kids, 3 in high school, like, and so she's like, she don't feel guilty about it, and it's a fight to get to the airport, but once she gets to the airport, how she can relax, she can travel safely, she can take in whatever surroundings and learn, and, you know, the whole 9, but that is something that's very important to her. And so that had me thinking it's giving me more of the courage that I have been looking for to do that myself, right? Okay. Because I think about the time, like, I'm going to contradict myself here in a minute, but when I think about the things that make me happy, that makes me feel like I'm getting refilled, it's me traveling and exploring stuff and literally getting lost in the streets in Rome or Paris or whatever, you know, like I like doing that. And I think when I think about ways to like just decompress, like that's what I want to do. Like I want to go and tour and learn and stuff like that. So I would do that. Okay. Now it's I asked you about the whole thing about like how are you feeling and how are you whatever. It's because I'm not like sad or depressed or anything like that. I have been doing this like self exploration, just trying to figure out like what, like getting back to pouring into myself and like doing stuff that I like. And I came to the conclusion that I don't even know what I like anymore other than traveling and reading. So like, I don't have any hobbies. I'm not knitting sweaters or playing tennis or like doing any of this stuff. Right. But I want to learn myself better. Right. Because who I was, the dreams, the hopes, the things I like to do at 21, 25, hell, even 30, that's not the same at 36, right? Fair. And so like that part of self-discovery, like even for Taraji, like she's going to Bali, she's going to find some shit. Maybe she like cooking, or maybe, maybe she'll find she likes making jewelry. I don't know what all they do in Bali, but like she's given herself the opportunity to learn herself all over again. And I am so happy for her for that. And I want to encourage everybody to do that, especially in the new year. Like, don't get so stuck in the mundane, the routine of being a mom, going to work, serving other people. Really start rediscovering who you are at this point in your life.
Yeah. And you don't have to take a major trip to Bali for a month to do that. Even if you can do it, I mean, I'm just being honest. Like for me, if you can get that, start with that weekend. If you've never done anything, start with like a weekend away. Take a day to sit and like meditate and do figure out ways, and you can build up to that is what I'm saying. Like, y'all don't have to just
do staycations and everything. Yep.
I don't want y'all out here like, girl, I can't take no month-long trip to Bali. I know what y'all talk about. But just starting with the little things and building from there and just really discovering yourself. You know, I think I'm pretty much an open book in the sense of what I like. But I think to Tia's point, it took me a minute to get there. Like, it did change, you know, it does. Things do shift, and that's very natural. You know, life changes, right? So you're going to change right along with it. But Tia, like, what's one thing if you could say, because I know you said, I know you're not depressed, you're not this, you're not that, but you realize I needed to find myself. What have you found so far about Tia? It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just one thing that's been an aha moment for you.
I think the biggest aha moment, and it was something like, okay, I always like traveling, but the biggest aha is like, yo, no, like your heart is in discovering and learning about other cultures. And so like you really have to find a way to regularly do that, right? To regularly be able to travel. And I really enjoy taking my kids, you know, like I know sometimes we need to decompress, but like the most fun time we had was taking our kids to Paris. Or us roaming the streets of London. Like my 7-year-old still remembers that. He was 5.
Yeah.
Or 4, one of them. You know, COVID years, you lose some stuff. But they remember going to the Eiffel Tower. They remember going to the Louvre, you know? Mm-hmm. So, like, that really was like an aha moment for me. And another thing that I'm extremely passionate about, and I've been talking about this for years, but it is really like a different fire lit under me, is like, I like children's books. I love the whole industry of children's books, like how kids' imaginations come alive when they are reading a book, how just different thoughts arise even when they see themselves, like the representation, the whole nine. Like I love literature in that way. And, you know, there's a new shift to that passion.
Sure. That's awesome, Tia. I love that. See, y'all?
I'm still discovering.
Go to Bali to figure that out.
That I like doing.
You said find something physical. You gonna find it. Whatever it is.
Something physical. Tennis or something. I gotta find something that I like.
You'll figure it out. Whatever it is, you'll figure it out. Everything happens on its own time. But I'm proud of you, and I'm so happy that you're finding these moments. And I hope y'all are listening, and it kind of lights a fire for you all to just really sit and do some self-discovery and figure out maybe more of who you are, or who you know, the new you. Sometimes it's not even about someone else knowing who we are. We have to figure that out for ourselves. So I hope during 2023, y'all take the time to do that. Okay, that's it for this week's Hot Takes. Coming up next, our conversation with Jemele Hill. On the show today, we have an Emmy award-winning journalist who you've all seen on Jemele Hill is Unbothered, Cari and Jemele Won't Stick to Sports, The Wire Way Down in the Hole, as well as ESPN's many shows, with his and hers being my personal favorite. She's also the co-founder of Lodge Freeway Media, a contributing writer for The Atlantic, and an author of her recently published memoir, Uphill, a Memoir. Jemele Hill, what up, though? Welcome to the show.
Look at you knowing the official Detroit greeting. Of course, you would know that. Yes. That is, as somebody put to me recently, is what up, though, a statement or a question? And I was like, it is both.
It is both. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved my time in Detroit. Me and Tia were both there when our hubbies played, which is ironically how we met. But people don't know Detroit is a sleeper. Okay, like from the food to the sports to the entertainment, we were always kicking it at concerts, Tia, like nonstop.
When I say I was devastated to leave Detroit and left Detroit to come to Seattle, I was like, what the hell I'm gonna do in Seattle after leaving the D? So
we have a different level of blackness in Detroit that I think people are not accustomed to. And I think currently, as it stands, we're actually the blackest city in the country. Like we are percentage wise blacker than Atlanta, which is increasingly gentrified. Yay. As is Detroit. Yeah, we are. We're blacker than Atlanta now. Listen, I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive Atlanta is almost like a 50-50 city. Like, I know DC, we're definitely blacker than DC because they also have suffered the effects of gentrification. So I think it's Detroit. I mean, it's still like 80% black. And, I go to the city probably at least 4 times a year. Both me and my husband, we're both from Detroit. All of our family, they're all still there as in the D. And it's changed so much since you all were there. A lot of growth, a lot of development, especially in the downtown area now that all of the sports teams are finally downtown. The Pistons were playing way out yonder, but now they in the D2. So
everybody's
it's
in the
good.
D.
Everybody's in the D, and the food's still banging.
Tell us your top 2 spots. What's your top 2 spots in the D?
All right, when I go back to the D, well, it's kind of 3 spots, and this is mostly because this is my husband's favorite place is Buddy's Pizza. Like Buddy's,
for
Detroit
sure.
Detroit does square pizza. Like everybody else has their version, but square pizza is our thing. So the 3 places I can guarantee you we're gonna go every time in Detroit is Buddy's. My favorite Chinese food place, which is called Golden Bowl. It's right in the hood. It's on 6 Mile. Like, I have to go there every single time. Golden Bowl, right? Golden Bowl is hitting. And and I suggest getting the almond bolus chicken with the extra gravy, the shrimp fried rice. Y'all don't know.
We
Y'all
gotta
don't know
take
that
some
life.
notes on that one.
I'm just saying, when you go there, now when you pull up, you're gonna be like, "Where the hell am I?" But don't worry, it's all
that's
good.
How you know that's how you know the food good, though.
That's
you
how
gotta
you know.
question the exterior,
because
you good.
Don't question it. Just don't question it, right? And I promise you, whatever you order will be ready in 10 minutes. It's just how they get down. So, so there, and then my third favorite place, which is not far from where the Lions play, is called Sweetwater Tavern. Best wings in the city. And is
somebody else
Sweetwater Tavern?
Sweetwater.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is that where Dawn was talking about, Tia?
I think so. So our hairstylist that we met in Detroit, she'll travel with us now. Look, where else would she be from?
And she lives downtown too, so that
she definitely knows Sweetwater.
Yeah.
She definitely knows Sweetwater. Yeah, because it's like one of those institutions in downtown Detroit. Best wings in the city, but they have everything. They have catfish. They got one of them Cheesecake Factory menus that's about 35 pages.
They got everything.
They got everything up in there, but that's probably my favorite. And the drinks. You getting 2-finger pours up at Sweetwater, so don't come playing around. You do not come to play up at Sweetwater. It's my favorite. It's probably my favorite bar in America.
Okay, so you're from Detroit. You spew the D, right? How the heck did you become a 49ers fan?
I know this seems very odd, and I say this, I'm sitting in my office and I'm staring right at one of my husband's prized possessions because he's a lifetime Lions fan. I told him he doesn't really value his mental health, clearly. But he, as I'm staring at his, for his 40th birthday, a good friend of ours got him a signed Barry Sanders jersey, which he adores, probably more than me. But no, it was when I was growing up in Detroit, we're talking about late 70s, 80s, or whatever. The Lions were really bad. I mean, I know that sounds kind of like an oxymoron because they're kind of always really bad, or at least the majority of their history, they have been really bad, but they were especially bad. They were 0-16 bad during this time, but they were bad, right? So
we were on that 0-16 team.
I know, and I hate to bring up an unpleasant memory, but it was, it was really an unfortunate time. And so around the same time, my mother, she was fresh off of living in Oakland. And, she really loved Joe Montana. She really loved the 49ers. And so she would kind of talk about them, and it just got me interested in watching the team. And they were winning at this time. And, that makes a heck of an impression on kids. It's like, who's winning? And the other Detroit sports teams were they had a lot of hope in them because, the Tigers were good. Like, they won when I was 9 years old. They won the World Series when I was 9. And then, in I think it was 81, the Pistons drafted a guy named Isaiah Thomas. So it was a lot of hope being put in the Pistons who are kind of making, their way. And so I just gravitated toward the 49ers, and I never left because the Lions honestly never gave me a reason to give up the fandom of the 49ers. But I do not root against the Lions because so many people in my family, a lot of my friends, they're Lions fans. And I want good things for them. And I want good things for the city, too. And you all know, having been there, even though I know Detroit held the moniker Hockey Town, the Lions are the most important professional sports team that's there. Like if they went to a World Series, if they start a winning culture, it will be the biggest sports story in Detroit, or I'm sorry, in Michigan, in the history. If the Lions went to a Super Bowl, that would be the biggest sports story in the state's history, and it's not even close.
It really would, because they are diehards. It don't matter what the record is. They are there. They are loyal. Like, I was like, this is crazy. You guys, they're like, through and through, we bleed blue.
Right,
exactly. Like, okay.
They might be, but they show up. The whole point, they coming. They ain't gonna stay all the time, but they coming.
Yeah, and real talk.
Yeah, and people are just very intense, as you know, about their passion for the Lions. So I want to see them do well in my lifetime, because I really want my husband to experience the joy. I want it for him.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about, you talked a little bit about growing up in the D and like just being in that era, growing up with all Black people, being raised by your mother and your grandma. Tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, you know, it was, Detroit is, as you both know, is like a very tough city. And by tough city, I mean like resilient, right? Because the people there have to be resilient. So when I was growing up in Detroit, I experienced, you know, the crack boom. You know, it's like suddenly you had like working class neighborhoods that just started to decline very fast. You saw, I mean, Detroit has always struggled with crime. And that became even a bigger issue when I was growing up, because the only time that you would see Detroit on the national news on like, you know, is because the murder rate had just gotten released, and Detroit was either usually number 1 or somewhere in the top 5. And so there was a lot of very negative perceptions about the city because of the crime, because of some of the infrastructure issues. And so, you know, you're growing up within that. But the people in Detroit have a lot of pride in where we come from. And because of it being a working class city, a blue collar city, there's a resiliency and a toughness that you learn there. So the city's DNA is like infused in everybody who's from Detroit. And as you all know, don't nobody put on for Detroit like Detroiters put on for Detroit. Like we put on for the city, because we realize we're up against a lot of negative stereotypes about the city. So, you know, that was sort of the backdrop of what I grew up in. And then on top of that, having these strong women in my family, my mother and my grandmother, both very strong women who endured a lot of trauma. And I had to watch them try to deal with that trauma. And as you all know, because of the conversations in our community have been so limited about mental health, or used to be. Like now I think it's at a much better point where we're openly talking about going to therapy, openly talking about mental health struggles. But that wasn't the case then. And so, you know, because of the unresolved trauma that my mother and grandmother had, I had to watch them struggle a lot with their own personal demons. And it impacted and changed my life. I mean, it changed my life in some really positive ways. And it also changed my life in some negative ways. I mean, one of the more positive end of it, I think, is that because seeing them go through what they went through, it not only instilled a type of resolve in me, but it also gave me some direction and ambition in terms of turning away from the things that I thought really undermined them from being their best selves.
Yeah.
That's so true.
So how did you... I mean, I know usually we all say like we want to do better than our previous generations, our parents and things of that nature. But how did you like not develop a tough exterior with your mom, given what you experienced?
Well, I did. I did develop a tough exterior in the sense that I saw the price and the cost of vulnerability, and that's a double-edged sword, you know. And like as much as I love the fact that people often characterize Black women as being like the strong Black woman, you know, that's like a thing, you know, and of us being so resilient, there's a lot of pressure, okay? There's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And it also denies us our right to, frankly, be vulnerable and to break down. Sometimes it's totally normal and fine to do that. Like we can only withstand so much. And sometimes women, especially Black women, are defined more by what they withstand than how they live. And I hate that for us, because this isn't about us being the emotional dumpster for everybody else. You know, we have to be able to find ourselves within how we live our lives. And so for me, developing that toughness was good in the sense that it prepared me for the world, but it was bad because it made me inept in many cases with personal relationships, being unable to let my guard down, being unable to, be vulnerable and emotional with people who I really cared about, because I was afraid of being disappointed because of what I had seen. And, I think probably another key factor in me overcoming a lot of what I overcame was that my mother, who struggled with addiction through most of my childhood with drug addiction, she never made it seem cool. She never glamorized it. She never made it seem like this is a path you can follow because, frankly, there are cases and instances when parents are living a certain lifestyle. They make it seem like this lifestyle is not costing them. Right. They do that. But my mother was never that way. She was always at every turn telling me to do the opposite. And not only that, she was always telling me I deserve better. So because she did that, I wanted better. I knew following her path was not the way to go. And so it allowed me to make much different decisions at those critical points than what she might have made. And so, she believed very much in the concept of breaking generational curses. Yes. And also, even though she didn't call it this then, of breaking generational trauma. She wanted better for me. And because I was able to really feel and receive that, it allowed me to want better and do better for myself.
I think about my childhood, and that's exactly the same sentiments come across because I think, oh my gosh, I always felt like no matter what my parents went through, they always wanted better for me. And so it did allow you to still dream. It still allowed you to go, be your best self and figure out what life you wanted for yourself. And that's a huge deal because a lot of people don't have that, And so what you realize is like, yeah, my parents loved me. They were struggling, but they loved me, They were just trying to still figure it out on their own. So,
I think that may sound kind of odd to people because it is straight from the book of do what I say, not what I do. And again, sometimes kids, as you know, they tend to follow your actions more so than your words. But what I would say also, in conjunction with that is that my mother not only wanted me to do better, she also set a standard for me. And by that, I mean that she I was expected to get good grades. I was expected to behave. I was expected to be respectful. These were standards that were set in my house. So her general position was, I don't care what you see me going through or doing. This is your expectation. You going to school, you're doing well.
College.
You're going to college, period. No matter what I'm struggling with, this is what I expect of you. And I think that was very important for her, not only to set that standard, but to constantly reinforce it.
I think part of it too, and which I know we'll dive into your book here shortly, is it seems like your mom actually spoke to you about what was going on. She didn't try to sugarcoat her life experiences and things of that nature. And I think I'll speak for my mom. She probably ain't gonna like it, but she tried to sugarcoat stuff and it was almost like you didn't know who she was because now I'm 36 and I'm like, wait, what happened? Okay, now that explains why your ass is mean or whatever,
Real talk.
But there's a huge level of respect for just understanding that, okay, your parents were full-blown individuals before you came along.
Yeah. And that's why they should be more honest with their children. I know that, it has to reach a point of being age appropriate, whatever it may be. But I hope when people read my book, that's one of the things that they take away from it is that, not only should as children, we ask more questions of our parents and grandparents and our elders in general, but they have to be willing to share some of the tougher parts of their lives that they don't always feel comfortable sharing with, because what it does in my mind is that it creates a atmosphere of empathy. You're able to see your mother now as a much fuller person than you maybe did before. And even in writing this book and talking to my mom so much about it, so I could, get her perspective and hear some of the stories that she had frankly not shared with me before. As I understood her history, even though I had long forgiven her, even though I definitely always had empathy for her situations and her struggles, this created an even bigger atmosphere of empathy between us. And I think it really helped our relationship. And even at times where we have friction in our relationship, I'm able to take a step back and understand where the friction is coming from.
Yeah. I remember you said something in the book that hit different for me, at least, because I remember thinking about this as a little girl. You said that you saw Black people who were broken, and you needed to believe that wasn't all that we were, and that we could be joyful, we could be vibrant. And I was like, I remember thinking those things, like, this can't be all there is. Like, this can't be. Like, did that bring you, was that hope you needed to, like, just keep going and to keep trying to pursue what it was you were ultimately looking for?
Yeah, and it wasn't until I was older that I got a better sense of what I was looking for. Is that, life can't, my life, being surrounded by people struggling with some level of addiction at various forms, it's like, this can't be it. Like this, it's got to be something else that we are capable of, some other parts of our lives that are much different than defined by the worst moments. And so I wanted to live a life, not that, I knew the traumas would come, the difficulties would come. So I wasn't trying to fool myself into believing that I was never going to go through anything. I knew that. But I also felt we were doing ourselves a disservice by spending so much of our lives only in survival mode. I'm like, there's got to be a different mode. It can't just be, we're just trying to survive everything that's thrown with us. And so, the world of journalism really opened up a brand new planet for me because, through journalism is the main component is curiosity. And when you cover something like sports, as I did and have done for many years, it allows you to not just meet and interact with different people, but you get to see the world. I've covered 2 Olympics. I've covered a World Cup. The World Cup was in South Africa when I covered it. And, I've gone to all these amazing countries and been able to report and see things on an international level that I would not have seen if I were not in this job. And so it really, traveling especially, really opened up a very joyous part of just not just myself, but just understanding our existence as Black people. Part of our honeymoon, like we went to Kenya, and Kenya was beautiful. It was so gorgeous. Having been to Ghana and like all these places, it's just like, oh, there's this part of the world and these parts of ourselves as Black people that we often don't see or experience, but there is joy there. There is pride there. There is thoughtfulness there. There's community there. And we're inundated constantly with the worst versions of ourselves. And so I was always trying to seek and be a better version of what I know we could be.
Speaking of community, we had Cari on last year, and she talked about when she came over to ESPN, like people were really like trying to pit her against you, right? Like saying, watch out for her, or, she's not happy for you, things of that nature. But she said that you wouldn't allow y'all to not be friends. Like she said, like you were the catalyst in you guys' relationship. Why was that so important for you?
Well, at that point, even though I hadn't been in TV that long, Cari's like a career TV person, but TV was not where I started. I started in writing. So I wrote for newspapers for a decade. And when I got to ESPN, I came there as a columnist for ESPN.com. So writing was more my natural home than television ever was. But just a short time I had spent in broadcasting, I just saw how the business just created rivalries between people, created adversarial relationships. Now, part of that responsibility is on women, and especially women of color who are in the business, to not fall for that trap of there can only be one, or, if one person succeeds, that means it comes at someone else's expense. Yeah. And so I've never had that mindset. Like I've always felt that one, what's for me is for me, and two, that seeing other Black women elevated in position only means greater visibility for all of us, because I hate that it's this way, but the reality is that so much of Black success is tied to another Black person succeeding. And so because of that, sometimes people need to see it in order to believe it, in order to understand that it works and it's always worked. And so when Cari got the job on First Take as the moderator, I was truly happy for her, even though they had considered me for a time at the same position. It never felt like a fit for me personally. And beyond that, I thought, given how popular the show was becoming and the platform that it was on, for any black woman to get that show was going to be a great look for all of us. And her getting it in many ways was a very big surprise, because I saw some of the people they brought in, and like hardly any of them looked like her. Most of them were not black. In fact, pretty much all of them weren't. And it seemed like they were going for a very specific type. And so when I saw that they decided to hire her, I knew intrinsically, without ever having a conversation with her, what she had overcome to get that. She didn't even know. But to some degree, I was like, girl, you have no idea. They were not looking for you, which means whatever you did in your audition had to really wow them. And especially with her coming over from the tennis channel and not having a traditional like sports broadcasting background, it said a lot about how talented she was, that she was still able to get that job. But knowing that there was this narrative that I was the one who was supposed to have the job, I never wanted her to buy into that narrative and then automatically assume. And given how our business is, it would not have been a bad assumption to assume that I wasn't happy for her, that I wasn't rooting for her, and that I didn't want to be friends with her. So I started basically stalking this woman when she got there. And I remember, and it also helped too that her and I had a mutual friend that we didn't even know. I mean, that I didn't know until she got the job, because my best friend from college was friends with Cari as well when they lived in Atlanta. And she was like, yo, my girl Cari is coming to ESPN. Like, you know, she's good people, this and that. And I was like, yeah, I really want to meet her, because her getting this job is like really big. And so when she got there, I sent her an email and I said, hey, I would love to take you to dinner, or let's meet up for drinks, you know, whatever. And I didn't hear from that heifer for about a good month or so. And I was like, I know she is not ignoring me. So I was like, let me send her another email or whatever. And finally, she got back to me, because some more time passed. I was like, oh, I'm waiting to run into this one in the hallway. Like, she gonna be my friend.
You lurking.
She like, I'm looking for her. Because our shows were in totally different buildings too. Right. So like at ESPN's campus, as you know, is vast. And we were like on the opposite ends of campus almost. And so I finally she responded, and then she told me, she was like, oh, I just didn't know how to work my email. Like she's like, I didn't learn how to work it, so I didn't know until she got it. So we went out to dinner, and the thing was, she jokes about like, yeah, after that dinner, I was like, yeah, she ain't gonna be my friend, only because I probably came on a little too strong in this way, is that I had been privy to how the producers, the expectations they had for that job, how they thought of that job, and for more importantly, how they thought a woman in that role should be, in the sense that they wanted them to be seen and not heard. That was essentially it. And I was just trying to put her up on game and just say, girl, like, they are going to be treating you a certain way, because this is how they see that job, and you have to break out of that and get them out of that, and really be strong and forceful about like what you believe and think and all of that, because they are trying to marginalize you. And so she probably thought I was trying to like set her up for failure. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, this is what they expected. And over time, she saw it was coming from a genuine place. And so we just, after that, we just became really fast friends. And at the time, I wasn't even living in Bristol. I was just coming in and out to do television. I was still living in Orlando at the time. And then I moved there full time in 2013. And, you know, we joked after both of our time there, like every bartender in the Bristol Hartford area knew who we were.
Yeah.
We can go back there now and be like, Josh, you still here? Because let me tell you, Bristol, it's a reason why the people who, or I should say the majority of people, and definitely a lot of the black people, why we referred to Bristol as doing a bid. We did our bid.
Oh, and got out.
Bristol, and got out. Yes. I was like, we got out. I was like, she was the first. I was like, Harriet, lead us to freedom, girl. Like, we got to get out of here. So we had a great time, and Cari became a lifelong friend after our experience there.
She's definitely a gem. I think about the both of you and, just everything that you've done for all of us. Okay. Let's just be clear. And just to meet you, in person some people they don't really, they're not down to earth. They're looking like, what are you doing over here? So, and I just really love that about Cari, and I love that about you, that you guys are just so down to earth, and you're actually genuinely good people, because it is rare. Let's just be honest.
Well, it's the reason why they say, what is the phrase? Don't ever meet your heroes because they'll disappoint you. Right? They always, it's like some adage like that. And everybody's probably had that experience where somebody from afar that like, oh, I'm sure they cool as hell. And then you meet them, you're like, oh, maybe not.
I had a completely different experience, how that would go in my head.
Right.
And this is not it. Yeah.
Something else you talked about in your book, when I think about ESPN and just all these roles on television, is makeup. And how for Black people in particular, they don't give you the needs and the wants basically everything you need as a Black person on television. They bring people in those positions or keep people in those positions that don't necessarily know how to apply makeup to Black skin. And I when you talked about that, I even think about that with Nate. Sometimes I'll be on texting him like, tell them to take off this strip down your nose and not to make you darker on the left side. Like, it's just crazy to me. How did you deal with that? Or how do you still continue to do it?
Well, and I was at a real disadvantaged position because I didn't wear makeup. So I didn't know anything about it. I mean, when you look in the mirror, you're like, that don't look right. But I don't know how to tell them what's wrong or how to fix it. Right? And that's why I told that story in the book about how this one particular makeup artist that they had at ESPN, who was clearly not at all comfortable or used to or accustomed to doing Black skin. I mean, she had me looking like Donald Trump. Like, I was that shade. I was
orange.
I was orange. And I'm like, oh, something ain't right, but I don't know what it is. And so Sage Steele walked in the makeup room and she saw me and she was looking at me like, girl. And so she politely told the woman, she was like, she looks a little, the color looks a little off. Maybe you want to try a little bit more of this, or whatever she suggested. She toned that orange down and it worked. And I was like, oh, thank God. And so, it's an unfortunate battle that Black women in not just television, but film and television are still facing, because as ridiculous as it sounds, this is true. But, TV networks, they will hire makeup artists and hairstylists who have no experience with Black hair or Black skin. And that will be considered perfectly fine. Meanwhile, when they hire Black artists, makeup artists, hairstylists, they gotta know how to do everybody's skin. So it's not the same. Like a Black makeup artist that's trying to make it in the film and television world could never survive not knowing how to do white people at all. Never could happen. But they will gladly let white makeup artists have that huge gaping hole in their resume. And the great thing is that thankfully over time, like ESPN got a lot better. And I think it's because Black women at the network started to be much more vocal about what we needed. I mean, ESPN they weren't doing hair when I got there. The person who changed that was Hannah Storm. Hannah Storm changed that. Yes, because they weren't doing hair at all. And she was like, I'm gonna need a hairstylist up in here. And then they got an entire hair department. And it was a lot of networks that were really behind in these areas. And even now, I still know Black women in this business who choose to do their own makeup because they don't trust the makeup departments at their stations and at their network. And so it's a sad battle. And I'm so glad that there's so many more Black creators. I remember when I did the show The Talk, with Lonnie Love and Tamara Mowry, and they I was so impressed. The Real, yes, not The Talk. You're right. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. It's The Real. Yes, it's The Real. So when The Real was on air, I went and did the show. I co-hosted one day, and I almost had a Fred Sanford moment when I walked into their hair and makeup department, which was all Black.
All Black.
And when that woman laid my edges, I was like, This has never happened to me. And I mean, not only did she lay the edges, she put the wrap around them. I was like, oh snap, we are dealing with something different up in here. I was like, yes, I could tell there is nothing but women of color on this show. Right. It was like, tell you what we're not gonna do is ain't nobody gonna have raggedy edges on our show. Like, real talk. Right. And then I noticed the difference. Like a lot of the shows that have black hosts or like a lot of black talent, like the makeup departments look like it. The makeup and hair departments look like it. So, but yeah, no, it's unfortunately still an uphill battle that we're facing because, I mean, black actresses, especially when you talk to them, they can tell you some horror stories about things that they've encountered on sets just because they did not have any makeup or hair stylists who understood black people.
So switching gears a little bit, in the book you talk about one of your shows, like the very first episode was your ride-along show. And you do the interview, great interview, and you use the term baby mama and got some backlash like from the higher ups about it. Do you still feel like you have to kind of like watch what you say because the people around you may not completely understand like how we communicate within our community? Or do you think you got like way more freedom now?
Oh, I'm past that point. I'm past that point. Definitely past that point now. But that's also, for my own protection, that's also why I am in partnership with people who understand that about me. They may not agree. You don't have to agree with everything I'm saying. I'm not asking for that. What I am asking is for the room to culturally connect to the audience I need to connect to. And for me to not put myself in situations where I feel like I got a code switch. Like I'm just not doing that. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because it's not widespread in the business. I had to get to the point where I'm basically in business for myself. I mean, I have my own podcast. Yep. Spotify's been a great partner with that. I write for The Atlantic. I've chosen to be in these spaces because they allow me to be myself. And one of the biggest lessons I took away from that experience at ESPN, particularly with how things ended, is like, I'm never going to put myself in a position again where there is that disconnect. Again, we don't have to always agree, but I need to know that you have the stomach for certain things. And it's not even, the thing that is always baffling to me, especially, using that example of the term baby mama being so offensive to the executive editor of the Sentinel, because she had no cultural understanding, like zero. Yeah. She had no idea that this was a widely used term. Okay. And that's, that was okay. And that's not to say that every widely used term is okay, but this was one of the ones that definitely was. And so she just didn't even have that cultural competency to know that and just assumed it was bad. And she wasn't interested in learning either, which is also another problem, right? And so I know people have this idea that the media is liberal, and that is not true. The people making decisions are not the people you see on TV, okay? And the people, I mean, they make some decisions, but it's a whole higher echelon of conservativeness that you face the higher up that you go. And, these cultures in these corporate media spaces are very clear about where the boundaries are sometimes, and those boundaries sometimes slide depending on what the reaction is. And what is disappointing to me, and I unfortunately just saw this happen to my dear friend Tiffany Cross at MSNBC when she was unceremoniously let go from the network in what was a very disappointing and felt like a personal way, is that you just don't often, for Black people who are outspoken, especially outspoken about our people, you do not have a lot of people in corporate media who are willing to support those kind of voices. You just don't. And so what I've tried to do in this iteration of my career, this season of my career, is put myself in spaces where I know that I can rely on a certain amount of support, because I don't want to go through, again, what I went through at ESPN.
Yeah. I remember you talked about that, not just with ESPN, but even just being in college. You talked about how, I think we're kind of forced into learning everything. We don't have the freedom to just only be in one specific bubble, right? And you talked about like the first, being the only Black female in college and your roommates, and how white people don't understand the concept of learning about Black people or needing to know about Black people, but you were thankful that your roommates were interested and you guys had these conversations and they wanted to know and you could be open and honest. But the reality is, to your point of being conservative, they all don't need to find out and they all don't want to find out.
No, I mean, it's the lack of interest for me. And it's not that, and I think most Black people would say that it's not the not knowing, because we can understand and we can understand you not knowing, like, but you don't care to know. It's what we get lost at. Like, so you're not even curious, or you don't want to do any further investigation as to see why this is beyond your very limited and narrow view of what you think of us. And, my time at Michigan State was a real racial awakening for me, even though that may seem strange because I came from a predominantly Black city where, I went to, my high school. I often joke about my high school in Detroit, Mumford. I was like, we were Lean On Me before y'all knew what Lean On Me was. Like, we were East Side High, definitely in many respects, right? And so, I mean, my high school was like 99.9% Black. I mean, that's how I was in middle school, elementary. I'd only gone to predominantly Black schools, was used to being in predominantly Black spaces. And I knew that Michigan State had a lot of white people because it's Michigan State, but I did not know they had that many white people where it was just like, oh, y'all in here strong. Like, y'all are up in here. Right? And, to go from being in a city that's like 85 to 90% Black to a campus that's only 3% Black, 3 to 5%, it was like, oh, this is a culture shock. And so my suite mates who were white, when we started getting to know each other and they told me they had never heard of Malcolm X, I was like, how? I was like, ever? And they knew pretty much what had been taught to them, which was like, there was this thing called slavery, and then Martin Luther King Jr. solved it. And then that was it. Yeah. That was the end, because Barack Obama hadn't happened yet. So that would have probably been another piece that they might have learned. And that was all that they knew. And because where they grew up in Michigan, it's a suburb of Detroit called Sterling Heights. And growing up, we used to call it Sterling Whites because it was so white, right? And we never went out there. It was like, what? All the white people? Nah, no thanks. So it was just like, because as y'all know from living there, Detroit is very segregated, right? Yes. It's like very, very segregated. So they didn't have any cultural competency beyond just knowing a few rap songs, like knowing Snoop. That was kind of the extent of it. And knowing like famous singers, Whitney Houston or something like that. Like that was really all that they knew. And it was one of those things where I was kind of embarrassed for them because we don't have any choice but to learn about that part, their history and, all things about white people, because that's really the viewpoint that everything is taught from, is that it centers whiteness. So I could name them probably 60 white leaders. Like, I mean, we could start like from George Washington and work our way on down. If I easily, like, wasn't, they would never be like, hey, have you heard of this guy called Abraham Lincoln? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, right. So it's just sort of
one day and be like, who is that?
Yeah, you know what? And look at their face. They'll be like, how, what? You don't know who Dwight D. Eisenhower is? How is this possible? And so, but there's not that, sort of give and take. So I find that a lot of the racial issues that we have in this country are built from ignorance because there's a lack of knowledge that's there. And, it was very eye-opening for me. And when I understood the lack of curiosity that white people do not have about us, it helped me sort of understand why racial dynamics were the way that they were. And, Michigan State was also like the first time I've been called a nigger happened in college. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, oh, well, this is not something I'm accustomed to. I mean, obviously. And just like seeing and experiencing like a level of like racial hatred had never happened until I got to campus. And so it gave me a very real picture of what the world was going to look like from then on out, and I'm thankful because of the way I was raised in Detroit, because the one thing of the many things I should say that Detroit gave me was a very strong sense of my racial identity. So I came there with that. And when those issues and problems cropped up at Michigan State, while it was shocking to me because I hadn't experienced it, it also made me even more proud of the identity that I had because that all had been established already.
Yeah.
You know, that's what frightens me about like my kids, like, even growing up in a city like Seattle, like, again, coming from Detroit to here. And I live in Bellevue, so there's a very small population of Black folks, right? And I almost wonder, I'm like, am I doing my kids a disservice? Because, you know, I'm trying to, you know, instill as much information about who you are and, you know, show the great examples like outside of athletes of like what our culture stands for and like who you can be. But I do see him like code switching. Like his little buddies at school, he talking a certain way, and then he get with his after school friends and it's completely different, you know? So
yeah, no, but that's so tough though, and I feel because a lot of my friends are in that position, you know, because a lot of my friends who, you know, I went to college with or like professionally, you know, we met as professionals, you know, they all have kids now, and the beauty is that we've been able, or I should say they've been, because I don't have any kids, they've been able to financially provide for their children in a way that they never ever experience, right? So the upside is that like you have these resources that you didn't have access to, but you almost wish you could give them also some of the things that you grew up with that were not resource-based necessarily.
Exactly.
Like I could not, if I had kids now, I can't duplicate what it's like to grow up in a Black city.
No.
I can't.
Not the D.
Like
that's
not
special.
the D. Like I can't. That's special. It's different.
So true.
Well, I guess maybe a little bit because I do live in a Black community here in LA. So it's like I was like maybe a little bit. Like,
Oh, really? We're not talking about that afterwards.
Yeah, we'll talk about that off air because you know I want people to know where I live. But yes, I mean I live in a predominantly Black community now, and it's great. But, you know, a lot of my friends are struggling with that same thing is that like, the great thing is that I put them in private school. But the bad thing is that I put them in a private school where they're the only one or where they're one of few, where they got to have I was talking to one of my friends recently and I had lunch with her and she was telling me, you know, that where her son goes to high school, they have a Black student association. I was like, ooh, in high school?
Yes.
I was
Middle
like,
school.
ooh.
Middle
I was
school.
like, oh, wow. I was like,
They
already
have
they have
groups.
They have affinity groups. I didn't experience the affinity group till I got to college. And I was like, you know, so it's tough because you can't kind of recreate that. And so I have a lot of my friends who are like, some are in Jack and Jill, which I know you guys know about. And some of them have to basically essentially create Black peer groups for their kids because they don't have any. Yeah. And I feel for them because I was like, wow, if there was something from my childhood, I would love to transport to children, you know, that I have would be that. It's like growing up in those kind of communities so that they can get it. And they can not only get a sense of their identity, but have it reinforced positively all the time.
Yeah, that's so true. I think similar to what Tia was saying, where I lived, I was one of the onlys, and like I feel like each classroom. But one thing my dad did is he found all activities, sports were all Black. Anything after school, we going down here. We going yonder.
Listen,
and that was
be in
my
the car
balance.
For an hour, but we gonna figure it out.
We gonna figure it out, right? But I really appreciated that because it did give me a balance. And he's like, I want you to know who you are. You can stand up in any room, no matter what room it is. You gonna know who you are, and you can talk with anybody. You gonna get the jokes because there are those friends that I met in college that didn't get the Black jokes, and they're like, "What is that?" And we like, "What?" You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm grateful for my dad for giving me that balance. You know,
yeah,
it's hard,
that cultural touchstone. I mean, this is where them cousins that live down south or live in some of these urban cities are real important. Where you like, can I send you to Baltimore for the summer? Okay.
Yes, you ain't lying. Family reunions, all of it. That's when they become very critical. That's so true.
Like at first you tried to avoid them family reunions. Now you're like, please invite us.
Send us the date. Let them. I think kids need to be, you know, they need to have a little bit of that so they can understand where we come from, right? I don't want them to just see where you are. You need to know where you came from. And you need to, you know what I'm saying? That's just so important. My kids probably get tired of me because I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But it's so important. It's not about where you are now. You got to go back. So you understand, you know, the history, and you can do better, and you're working for something bigger than yourself. You know?
We can't lose these recipes. We can't lose them.
Listen.
We can't lose the recipes.
They gone with me. They gone. Look, we got to figure it out another way.
They go with me.
Tia don't cook. She's like, I'm good.
I'm a sous chef. I do the grocery shopping, Thanksgiving, all of that. But you want me to get in there and cook? They gone.
Well, it applies to more than to just cooking, but the recipes of blackness is what I mean.
No. Let's be clear. Look,
we can't lose those.
I told Toya this, or I guess it was 2 years ago for Thanksgiving. The kids did like a cultural project. Again, my kid is one of 2 black kids in his class kind of thing. And so he's like, I'm going to do, his dad is Haitian. I'm clearly African-American. And he was like, I'm going to do soul food. Because the last time we did this cultural project, I did my Haitian side, right? So he's doing soul food. He Googled his little picture. He's doing his little board. And he's like naming the stuff on the thing. And he's getting them wrong. I.e., he points to something. And he goes, oh, those are smashed carrots. I'm like,
Smashed
those
carrots.
are sweet potatoes. And then I point to the greens.
He said smashed carrots.
He said smashed carrots. He pointed to the greens, and I was like, "You better know what these are." He was like, "Spinach." I'm like, "Oh shit, I failed. Don't you trip though?"
Didn't you post something on social media about that? Like, was it fried chicken? Wait, what was it you posted?
My youngest kid
for the first
yeah.
time. I was hollering. You hear me? Eyes wide.
But I don't eat I don't eat meat on a bone. It creeps me out. So he had never had chicken on a bone. So when I gave it to him, I guess it was like 3 weeks ago. So this is recent. He was looking at that like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? But it's okay. We give him blackness in other ways.
So where did you take him to get the chicken?
So really in my house we're pescatarian. Like me and my husband, we only eat fish and seafood. But my kids are like, we still want chicken kind of thing. So when we went to the little soul food place here, traveled 45 minutes for it. He said he wanted chicken, but all they had was wings. And I just, give me the 2-piece or whatever. He got home, he was looking at that damn chicken like, this is not the chicken I asked for. What is it? No, that was him.
Okay. Did he eat it?
Girl, no, he hated it. He said, I don't want that anymore.
You know what? You got to take him to Popeyes. Please take this poor baby to a Popeyes.
He just gonna get chicken tenders.
They do.
They do chicken tenders, but he could get a chicken breast though. Mm-hmm. We get a chicken breast.
That's okay. We failed, but it's okay. We're working on that. We are working on that. Okay.
At some point, maybe in your travels, you can get them some for real, like some fried fish that's like made from the soul.
Yep.
So there you go. Y'all can enjoy that as a family.
We do that.
When we go to Arizona, we go into Lolo's. We go into Lolo's. He will be there. You're going to take him to Lolo's Chicken and Waffles. We'll be there.
Oh, yeah. I've been to Lolo's. Yeah, I've been to Lolo's. Yep, there you go.
We got
you come. Listen, you come to LA, hit me up. I know exactly. I got 15 places to take you. We gonna make sure.
Where are the tenders? Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. So the theme for our season leading up to our Super Bowl show is the route to becoming you. So curating a playbook of just tips and tools for women to just make it through this journey called life. Chapter 2, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about what your plans were at the age of 21, 22, like where did you see yourself being? Like what was the end goal?
So I think where I saw myself then was like, my dream was to write for Sports Illustrated. That was my dream because I was a writer. Yeah, ESPN was never on the vision board. So I wanted to write for Sports Illustrated, write these long form stories, profiles, that kind of thing about sports, about athletes. And I would have been excited to just make $50,000 a year. Understand that when I came out of college, the average salary for a professional journalist was $19,000 a year. Okay.
That's so crazy.
It is crazy. And I was like, wow, it's crazier that I still was like, yeah, let me go right ahead and do this anyway. Right? I never made $19,000. I made 22, but I never made 19. So so I was ahead of the game.
Exceeded your expectations.
I was ahead of the game. I was like, yeah. But I do believe, and this is sort of the problem with being 21, 22 years old, and like for most 21, 22-year-olds, there are definitely some exceptions. It's not that your dreams are too big, it's that they're too small. And I can say, candidly, I had small dreams at 21, 22 years old. I never envisioned the life that I'm living now. I never even thought it was possible. I didn't even know about it And so that, I mean, if there's any piece of advice I would leave with people is that whatever it is you think your dream is, I need you to make it 10 times bigger. Mm-hmm. Ooh, and then really give yourself something to shoot for, right? Like we often shoot for dreams and goals that are actually attainable, because it's kind of easy to do that, to be like, oh yes, I want to own my own business. That's a good dream. To do that. It's safe to do that, right? Like that's a good dream. That's a good goal for sure. But what if you said, hey, I want to own 20 franchises? That's like different. That puts a little more pressure on you to do something, right? And so now I'm actively or being more intentional about dreaming so much bigger than what's in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Whew, that was a word for me. That was good. I mean, because you don't think about that. You don't think about dreaming 10, 20 times bigger. You're just working on that one goal that you set, So that was good. Thank you.
But it's almost like you force yourself to be realistic. And what realistic means,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and then, which is, I mean, there's definitely a dose of realism is helpful for sure, because it allows you to tangibly attack certain goals. But what women do especially is that we talk ourselves out of things more than we talk ourselves into them, because we are practical, and we suffer more than anybody from thinking so much about what happens if it doesn't happen. Like our what if is in the negative, or like what if I'm not qualified? I remember when I read Sheryl Sandberg's book, which the name is just Lean In, right? Read Lean In years ago. I thought one of the best gems in the book was when she talked about how she's often in board meetings, or not board meetings, often in meetings in general. And all the women, when it comes to like new projects or things they want people to like sign up for, like new challenges, the men just rush to the front of the room, whether qualified or not, to be like, yes, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah.
There will be women in that same room who are 99% qualified to do that thing she's asking them to do, but they will talk themselves out of it because they're so worried about the 1% that they don't know. Like, meanwhile, a dude could be, he could be 10% qualified. He like, yep, I'm going to do it. Oh, rocket science? Yep, I can do that. Has no idea. Because, if it's one thing a man is going to find, it's the audacity. So it's like, they going to find it. They're going to find it. I got that from somebody else. So that is not holding mine, but it's true. It's 100% true. Yeah. They will find it. Like, they have the most irrational confidence about things. And it's like, I don't even know how you think this, but okay. Yes. Women, we are the opposite. And so we need to actually borrow some of the irrational confidence that men have. So and I think it's partly because of it's a fear and an insecurity that we have of being exposed. Because we know as a woman, especially as a Black woman, the stakes are higher. So like if we make a mistake, if we don't in one instance not know the answer to a question, then we feel like the whole house of cards is going to come crumbling down. And so we have to figure out a way to get out of that fear so that we can challenge ourselves and really tap into the greatness that we often talk ourselves out of exposing.
That's really good. I'm going to just digress just a little bit. I want to ask you, speaking of, you wrote this book. How did it come about? Why did you want to do this?
Well, the candid answer is that it came about because of money. It didn't really... I got to be truthful here. I wasn't really... it did, because I was not looking to write a memoir. No, I wasn't. And my literary agent told me there was a lot of interest in me doing it. And he's like, the publishing world is very interested in you telling your story. And when I kind of came up with, a book proposal, when I did my book proposal and, it got sent out, the book went to auction, which means multiple publishers bid on it. And I was like, well, I guess I'm in it now, man. Like, I guess I do have to write this. And once that was, once I decided to go with Hope Publishing, which they've been really phenomenal. I was like, okay, there's only one way to write a memoir, and you have to write it in the most candid, transparent way. Otherwise, you don't want people to leave reading your memoir with the sense you're not being real with them.
Yes.
A lot of celebrities or known people, they write memoirs, and you might read it and be like, I feel like they didn't tell the complete truth about this, or like there's something missing. And so I didn't want people to have that sense of something missing. They, I laid it all out there. I know I was like, hey, if people judge me for it, they judge me for it. It's just what it is. But I needed for me to feel good about putting this memoir out. I needed to do it in a way where I laid my soul bare.
Yeah. Well, that's what I loved about it, because I felt like your transparency came through and you got to see a different side of you. When you talk about vulnerability, when you talk about, letting that guard down and opening up, you did. I mean, it was all the way down. It was just like, it was easy to read. You could feel what you were saying, and that's rare when you read, to your point. It's rare. So I appreciated all of it. It was great.
Oh. Yeah, thank you. I mean, and the reception from the book has been so positive and overwhelmingly so that it's really been humbling for me to see how many people can connect with my story, can relate with it, or relate to it. And the fact that they said that it's helped them have some conversations with their parents, that they hadn't thought about having, and even how maybe impacted how they have chosen to address trauma in their own families, which has really been a bright point of this that I hadn't quite expected.
Yeah. And I'll be 100% honest. I'm one of those people, and this is not like just throwing fluff, but like your relationship with your mom, like really moved me, because I thought I had gotten over like certain things that happened within the relationship with me and my mom. But to kind of see like, you navigate the space and still allow your mom to be you, for you to still set boundaries of what, the space and things that you want to curate, but then y'all still have a good relationship. Like, it's beautiful. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And it wasn't easy. I mean, it took some years to get, to a certain point. And, one thing that came out of it, I've thought this for a while, but I got to be honest, I never thought my mother would go for it or be open to it. And maybe that was a bad assumption on my part. But like, she recently said to me that she was very open to us like going to therapy together. And I was like, well, don't threaten me with a good time. Let's go ahead and do this. Because I do think for her, there's probably a lot more that she needs to individually unpack that she has not and deal with. And I want that for her. I want her to be able to really forgive herself, because she has struggled with this a lot and throughout her life, like because she's been drug free for like decades now, and so but she still struggles with the guilt a lot, and that guilt and that lack of forgiveness for herself shows up in our relationship all the time. And so I want her to be able to, her to be able to feel empowered enough to forgive herself.
That's good. I think that more people should be open, and I hope they read, because they need to be open to therapy. It releases so much. You just realize that, a lot of people, you did the best you could do at the time. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. And that's just it. No parent goes into it, being like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I'm going to be this for everybody wants the best. And so everybody's coping mechanisms are different. I think about my dad and our relationship. I told Tia about this. Our relationship is so much better now, but it took having those hard talks. It took therapy. It took all those things. And it's so important that we are open to it. Just try it. We try everything else. Try therapy, y'all.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right.
Okay, well, before we let you go, we want to play a little game.
Yes.
Games are my favorite. Oh, snap. Of course.
All right, you want to start, Toya?
Okay. So we used to do the 2-minute drill. Tia, do you still want to do the 2-minute drill, or should we do a Jemele style?
We can do a Jemele style.
Okay, we're going to do Jemele style because, everybody knows Jemele Hill, and your thoughts, the way you eloquently say things.
That Twitter account.
Listen, people love it. So we're going to talk about some recent stuff going on, and you let us know what you think, okay? You got 2 minutes.
Right. Okay.
First thought, Kyrie Irving.
Misguided.
That's good.
Misguided. Passionate though. I mean, like really, really a good guy. Really is a good guy. I know people. I don't like that people try to put him and Kanye in the same boat. They're not in the same boat at all.
At all.
Like Kyrie's is much different. Like he's a good human being, and he's very giving and very charitable. But I think this was a misstep. It was a misstep.
That's good.
It shouldn't cost him his career, but it was a misstep.
Yeah.
Agreed. That's good. Okay, next up, good old Jerry Jones.
Jerry Jones.
What'd you say? Flashback.
Old. I mean, no. With Jerry, I think I'm trying to think of the one word. Irresponsible would be the word that I would say. That when I think about Jerry Jones, because I think if that photo, the photo in itself, it's a big deal because of where he was and the time he was. His response to the photo made it disappointing. That's what's so disappointing about that, because in many ways that response to the photo is how he's responded to other moments as a full-grown adult and an NFL owner that he has frankly missed the mark on. He missed the mark on the Kaepernick protest. He missed the mark when it has come to helping to advance the conversation about the black head coaches. He is, for him to have as much power as he has, he shrinks in the moments that matter. And that is what that photo represents.
Purposely shrinks.
Purposely.
Yep.
That's good. Okay, next up, Tia.
Kanye West.
Fool. I mean, like, just a fool. I understand very much mental health struggles, but what he's talking about and what he's doing, these are things that are in him, right? Like, just because you're struggling, even with bipolar disorder, that doesn't make you a Nazi sympathizer, right? Those are not the same things. And his level of clownery and buffoonery stems from an issue he's always had, which is narcissism. It's just the narcissism is now on 1,000 because it's unchecked, and he is just out here ruining everything he's built in real time. None of this was on the bingo card at all. But when it's few people you can think of that have done more self-inflicted harm than he has to his reputation, to his money in the last 2 years. Very few people. So I think what is going to happen to him is going to be such a stunning fall that we will look back at this time like, wow, that really happened.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, last but not least, women's rights.
We need them. And it's, I guess, it's one of those things that puts a fire in your belly, but is also disappointing at the same time, is that we're still having conversation about reproductive rights. We're still having conversations about equal pay. We're still having conversations about equity. Like, why are we still having these? We still here. I mean, I know there's been bubbles and flashes and extended periods of progress, but it just feels like the plight to not fully, have women in an equitable place is just the progress. The backlash against that is still so stunning to believe that these are conversations that we really should have advanced well beyond. So, that conversation is even more layered and nuanced and specific for Black women who are at the bottom rung of this all. I remind people like Black women were the last to get the right to vote. It was us. All right. And so that hierarchy is a continued pattern in history of us being the last to get a lot of things and getting the least amount of credit for a lot of stuff. And as I have to constantly say to people, we are not your savior. We are not your mule. We are not these things. We are more than these things. We, of course, are community minded. We, of course, have always been that way. Yeah. Black women have always thought of the collective more so than themselves. Yes. At some point, we have to think of ourselves.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Woo. That's a word.
What's next for you?
I'm really excited about the fact that I've been able to collaborate with Spotify and create a podcast network for Black women called the Unbothered Network, which launched officially the first week of November. We have 2 podcasts that are on there that are absolutely phenomenal. One is called Sanctified, which is a podcast about faith, about how Black women worship and how and why Black women are no longer fitting in the traditional model of church as many of us grew up, about how Black women are finding faith for themselves and on what terms. So I love the issues. These women talk about LaVon Briggs, who's as she describes herself, a womanist pastor, and Deborah Joy Winans of Yes, That Winans Family, a wonderfully acclaimed actress, and they talk about the thorny stuff, abortion, the purity culture in church, like all these different topics, and they have some hysterical conversations around them. So really, really proud of that as being the first Unbothered Network original. And then the other podcast is called The Black Girl Bravado. Brittany in Germany hosts that. They're two very electric personalities. They specialize in homegirl wellness, as they call it.
I love that.
I love it.
So they're giving it to you real, for sure. And they're just so positive, have such great energy, and they talk about all the things, from boundaries to relationships to all sorts of things that are across the spectrum. When I created this network, I wanted it to try to reflect the fullness of who Black women are beyond the tropes that people know about us. And it's been fun to explore that. So we have some more podcasts that will be released on the network. And so I'm just really excited about seeing where this will all lead.
We are as well. And we just thank you for just bringing your fresh perspective. We love how passionate you are. We love your views. We thank you for advancing the culture. And quite frankly, I just thank you for having the courage to say what most people are afraid to say.
Well, as I said to somebody else when they were asking me about that, I was like, oh, it's not that I'm courageous. It's just when I say things, I'm just ahead of my time a little bit. I was like, if I said them, I was like, my timing is just off. It's like I had to say them when more people are like, yeah, as opposed to 5 years before, and I'm like, ooh, no, they're not at this point yet. Okay, all right, I'll wait. But I said it, so
and they always go back and be like, well, she was right.
She was right.
She was right.
Once again.
Yes, as you know, the unofficial title of most Black women is "We told y'all." We told y'all.
Yeah, it's so true.
That's literally our unofficial title.
Real talk. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, ladies.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you, Jemele. That was such a great conversation. She's just so wise, and I just love the way she puts her words together. If y'all haven't read her book, go check out her book.
Yes. You can, check it out. You can read it because, we like a good page turn. But I actually did this one on Audible because I was on the move and couldn't sit still. So I'm like, okay, let me look. But no, Jemele is phenomenal. And just in regular conversation, she's dropping so many gems.
Yes.
So many tips and tools for women to continue pushing through. Thanks, Jemele, for coming on. For coming on.
Jemele, yes, we appreciate you so much. All right, well, that's it. That's the show, y'all, for the latest on Inside Lines podcast. Make sure to follow us on both Instagram and Facebook at Inside Lines Podcast.
And be sure to check us out at insidelinespodcast.com and YouTube, y'all. We are on YouTube. Our handle on YouTube is Inside Lines Podcast, so be sure to check us out.
Until next time, leave it all out on the field. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.